Book 3, The Weeping Widow's Legacy, Shadows of the Opera. Chapter 1, The Curtain Rises. In the heart of a bustling city stood the Grand Opera House, a majestic structure echoing with the melodies of its glorious past. Its grandeur, however, was shadowed by whispers of a tragic history and ghostly tales. Leo, a young and ambitious opera director, gazed upon its towering facade, his eyes reflecting a blend of awe and determination. He was about to embark on a journey to revive the opera house's glory with a grand production. As Leo stepped inside, the echo of his footsteps mingled with the silence that hung heavily in the air. The grand hall, once a hive of activity and applause, now lay dormant, waiting for life to be breathed into it once again. Leo, though aware of the eerie ghost stories, was dismissive of them. To him, they were nothing more than fables meant to spook children. His first days at the opera house were consumed with preparations. He auditioned performers, selected a crew, and meticulously planned every aspect of the production. However, as rehearsals began, strange occurrences started to unfold. Shadows seemed to dance in the corners of the hall, and a cold wind whispered through the corridors even on the stillest days. One evening, as Leo worked late, he heard a soft, sorrowful weeping emanating from the stage. He rushed towards the sound, only to find the stage empty, save for a solitary, flickering candle. The air was heavy with a sense of despair, leaving Leo unsettled yet curious. Intrigued by these odd happenings, Leo delved into the history of the opera house. He uncovered a story that mirrored the Weeping Widow's legend. A renowned opera singer, known for her captivating performances, had been betrayed by her lover. Heartbroken, she died on stage, her final aria echoing through the halls. As the days progressed, the hauntings intensified. Cast and crew members reported fleeting glimpses of a ghostly figure in a tattered bridal gown, wandering the corridors and disappearing into thin air. Props related to the show mysteriously moved or got damaged, sending a ripple of fear through the team. Despite the growing unease, Leo remained focused on his goal. The opening night was drawing near, and he was determined to see his vision come to fruition. Yet, the opera house seemed to have its own plans, as the ghostly occurrences became more frequent and unsettling. One night, as a thunderstorm raged outside, Leo stayed back to ponder over the script. The lights flickered, casting ominous shadows across the room. Suddenly, the sound of a piano playing a melancholic tune filled the air. Leo followed the sound to the main stage, where he saw the ghostly figure of the bride, her fingers moving gracefully over the piano keys. The haunting melody enveloped Leo, pulling him into a world of sorrow and betrayal. He stood there, transfixed, as the figure turned towards him, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. In that moment, Leo felt a connection to the spirit, a shared understanding of loss and heartache. The encounter left Leo deeply affected, fueling his resolve to uncover the truth behind the Weeping Widow's curse and the opera house's tragic past. He knew that the opening night was more than just a performance, it was a race against time to appease the spirit and prevent a disastrous culmination of the curse. As the story of the Weeping Widow's legacy began to unfold, Leo realized that the shadows of the opera house held more than just tales of the past. They were a doorway to a haunting reality, one that he was now a part of. Chapter 2 Whispers in the Dark. The opera house, once a beacon of art and culture, now stood shrouded in a cloak of mystery and fear. Leo, still reeling from his spectral encounter, found himself drawn deeper into the opera house's enigmatic past. The ghostly apparition of the bride, both haunting and sorrowful, seemed to be calling out to him, beckoning him to uncover the truth. As the days passed, the rehearsals took on a tense atmosphere. The cast and crew were on edge, their nerves frayed by the unexplained occurrences. Whispers of the weeping widow circulated among them, each recounting their own eerie experiences. A shadow passing behind a curtain, a sudden chill in an otherwise warm room, or the faint sound of weeping in the dead of night. Leo, determined to keep the production on track, tried to maintain a facade of skepticism. But deep down, he couldn't shake off the feeling that they were not alone in the opera house. The ghostly figure of the bride seemed to be everywhere, her presence an ever-looming shadow over the rehearsals. One night, as a dense fog enveloped the city, the opera house seemed more sinister than ever. Leo stayed back, poring over old documents and clippings about the opera house. He stumbled upon an old photograph of the opera singer who had died on stage. Her eyes, full of unspoken stories, seemed to stare right into his soul. Just then, a loud crash echoed through the hall, jolting Leo from his thoughts. He rushed to the source of the sound, only to find a shattered mirror backstage. In the reflection of the broken glass, he caught a glimpse of the bride's figure, her face twisted in anguish. The following days brought more unnerving incidents. Cast members reported their belongings being tampered with, and several experienced vivid nightmares about the weeping widow. The atmosphere of dread was palpable, and even the most skeptical among them began to fear the curse of the opera house. Leo, desperate for answers, sought out a local historian, an elderly woman named Mrs. Aldridge, known for her knowledge of the paranormal. In her cluttered study, amidst books and artifacts, she listened intently to Leo's account of the events. Mrs. Aldridge explained that the opera house was a nexus for spiritual energy, a place where the veil between the living and the dead was thin. The weeping widow, she believed, was not just a lost soul but a manifestation of the opera house's tragic history. She warned Leo that the spirit was growing stronger, feeding off the fear and sorrow within the opera house. To appease the weeping widow, they would need to uncover the full story behind her heartbreak and the opera singer's tragic death. Armed with this new knowledge, Leo returned to the opera house with a renewed sense of purpose. But as he delved deeper into the mystery, he couldn't shake the feeling that the weeping widow was watching him, her mournful eyes following his every move. As the opening night drew closer, the line between reality and the supernatural began to blur. The opera house, with its dark corners and whispering halls, became a stage not just for Leo's production but for a much older, more sinister play. The weeping widow's legacy, it seemed, was far from over. Chapter 3: Echoes of the Past. The opera house, now a labyrinth of shadows and secrets, seemed to hold its breath as Leo continued his quest to unravel the mystery of the weeping widow. The walls, steeped in history, whispered tales of love, betrayal, and sorrow, echoing the heartache that had seeped into its very foundation. Leo's nights were consumed by research, delving into archives and old newspapers, piecing together the tragic story of the opera singer. Her name was Elise, a star whose light was extinguished too soon by a tale of betrayal. She had loved deeply, and her heartbreak resonated through the years, intertwining with the legend of the weeping widow. As the days passed, the supernatural occurrences intensified. Props were found broken, and eerie footprints appeared on the dusty stage, leading to nowhere. The air was thick with a sense of foreboding, and the cast and crew were on the brink of hysteria. During rehearsals, the sound of sobbing would sometimes permeate the hall, halting the performers in their tracks. The ghostly cries seemed to seep from the walls, a mournful lament that chilled the soul. Some nights, a spectral figure was seen gliding across the balconies, her veil trailing behind her like a shroud. Leo, despite his fear, was determined to press on. He felt a strange connection to Elise, her story resonating with him on a profound level. He believed that by bringing her story to light, he could somehow bring peace to her spirit. His only ally in this endeavor was Mrs. Aldridge, the historian. She cautioned him that the spirit of Elise, entwined with the weeping widow, was a powerful entity. She believed that the opera house was a conduit for Elise's unspent emotions, her unfulfilled dreams, and her unquenched thirst for justice. One stormy night, as lightning illuminated the opera house, Leo found himself drawn to the main stage. The air was electric, charged with an unseen energy. As he stepped onto the stage, the spotlight flickered on, bathing him in a ghostly glow. There, in the center of the stage, stood the weeping widow, her eyes hollow with grief. She reached out to him, her hand passing through his body, sending a shiver down his spine. In that moment, he heard Elise's voice, a whisper carried on the wind, recounting her tale of love and betrayal. Shaken by the encounter, Leo realized that the opening night of his production was more than a mere performance. It was a conduit for Elise's story to be told, a chance for her voice to be heard once more, not just by the living, but by the spirits that lingered in the shadows of the opera house. As opening night approached, the atmosphere grew increasingly tense. The cast and crew moved through their routines with a sense of urgency, their eyes darting to dark corners, half expecting to catch a glimpse of the weeping widow. Leo, working tirelessly, infused the production with elements of Elise's story, hoping to create a tribute to her life and her unfulfilled dreams. Mrs. Aldridge assisted him, providing insights into the spiritual significance of their endeavor. The night of the performance arrived, a tempestuous evening where the winds wailed like mourning spirits. The audience, oblivious to the true nature of the play, filled the seats, their chatter a cacophony in the grand hall. As the curtain rose, a hush fell over the audience. The stage came alive with actors, their performances charged with an intensity that transcended mere acting. The story of Elise, her love, and her betrayal unfolded, captivating the audience with its raw emotion. Midway through the performance, the atmosphere shifted. A cold breeze swept through the hall, and the lights flickered ominously. The audience, sensing something unearthly, sat in rapt attention. Then, at the climax of the play, the weeping widow appeared on stage. Her presence was not planned, her ethereal form gliding across the stage, her mournful gaze fixed on Leo. The audience gasped, some believing it to be an elaborate special effect, while others felt the chill of something far more supernatural. Leo, standing on the stage, faced the weeping widow. He spoke not just his lines, but words of understanding and compassion, acknowledging both Elise's pain and the widow's endless sorrow. The opera house fell silent, the only sound the soft, heartbreaking sob of the ghostly bride. As the performance ended, the weeping widow's form began to fade, her expression one of relief and gratitude. The audience erupted into applause, unaware that they had witnessed a genuine spiritual event. Chapter 4: Shadows Unveiled. In the aftermath of the performance, the opera house stood bathed in an eerie calm. The audience departed, their whispers and exclamations echoing through the grand hall, leaving behind a palpable silence. Leo, standing alone on the stage, felt a profound sense of change in the air. The weeping widow's apparition had vanished, but her presence lingered, a ghostly imprint on the very soul of the opera house. The days that followed were a blur of accolades and questions. The performance was hailed as a masterpiece, its haunting finale the subject of fervent discussion. Yet, amidst the praise, an undercurrent of fear rippled through the cast and crew. They had felt the presence of something otherworldly that night, a truth too unsettling to voice. Leo found himself at a crossroads. The success of the show had brought him recognition, but the experience had changed him. He could no longer view the opera house as just a venue. It was a vessel of untold stories and unacknowledged tragedies. Driven by a newfound purpose, Leo began to explore the other forgotten tales of the opera house. He scoured through old records and interviewed longtime residents of the city. Each story uncovered a layer of the opera house's mysterious past, revealing a tapestry of joy, pain, and spectral echoes. As he delved deeper, Leo started to experience vivid dreams. Night after night, he found himself wandering the corridors of the opera house in his sleep, guided by an unseen force. In these dreams, he encountered the spirits of those who had once graced its stage, each spirit sharing their story, their voice a whisper in the darkness. Among these phantoms was a young ballerina, her life cut tragically short in a fall from the grand staircase. Her spirit danced eternally in the moonlit hall, her movements a silent lament. Another was a playwright, whose unproduced masterpiece haunted the dusty script archives, his spectral figure forever penning lines that would never be spoken. Leo's obsession with these ghostly tales began to take a toll. His nights were sleepless, his days consumed by research. The opera house became his world, its shadows his companions. One evening, as a storm raged outside, Leo sat in his office, poring over old photographs. The wind howled through the cracks in the walls, a symphony of despair. Suddenly, the lights flickered, plunging the room into darkness. In the dim glow of his candle, Leo saw figures emerging from the walls, their forms hazy and indistinct. They were the spirits of the opera house, drawn to the light of his candle. They surrounded him, their faces etched with sorrow and longing. Leo, his heart pounding, realized they were seeking something from him, acknowledgement, understanding, a voice to tell their stories. He knew then what he had to do. The opera house was not just a building, it was a sanctuary for lost souls, a place where their stories could be told and their presence acknowledged. Leo decided to dedicate his life to bringing these stories to light, to give a voice to the voiceless spirits that wandered its halls. As the storm outside raged on, Leo sat among the spirits, a lone guardian in the heart of a haunted opera house, ready to embark on a journey into the unknown, into the heart of the shadows. Chapter 5: The Haunting Melody. The opera house, once a hub of artistic brilliance, now took on a more somber role under Leo's guardianship. It became a sanctuary for the stories and spirits that had long been neglected. Leo, driven by a sense of duty, continued his quest to unveil the hidden histories within its walls. Night after night, he roamed the halls, his only companions the flickering candlelight and the ethereal figures that whispered their tales. The more he listened, the more he understood the depth of sorrow that permeated the very fabric of the building. One evening, as Leo explored the upper balconies, he heard a faint, haunting melody. It was a piano, its notes echoing through the empty halls with a sorrowful resonance. Drawn by the sound, he descended to the main auditorium where he found an old grand piano, its keys moving seemingly by themselves. As he approached, the playing ceased abruptly, and the lid slammed shut, startling him. It was then that he saw her, a ghostly figure seated at the piano, her hands resting on the keys. She turned to him, her eyes filled with an eternal sadness. This was not the weeping widow, but another spirit bound to the opera house, the ghost of a pianist whose career had been tragically cut short. Leo, feeling a mix of fear and compassion, approached the piano. He gently opened the lid and began to play a simple melody. As he played, the pianist's spirit appeared beside him, her hands mirroring his movements on the keys. Together, they filled the silent opera house with music, a duet between the living and the dead. This encounter marked the beginning of a series of nightly visits from various spirits. Each night, a different specter would appear, sharing their story with Leo through whispers and shadowy visions. There was the stagehand who fell from the catwalk, his presence marked by the sound of phantom footsteps overhead. Then there was the actress who had taken her own life in her dressing room, her sorrowful visage reflected in the mirror. As the nights passed, the line between the living and the dead blurred for Leo. He found himself more at home among the spirits than in the world of the living. The opera house became a realm where time and reality seemed to fold in upon themselves. One particularly stormy night, as thunder echoed through the grand hall, Leo heard a different sound, a chilling, guttural growl that seemed to emanate from the very bowels of the opera house. He followed the sound to the basement, where no spirit had led him before. In the darkness of the basement, Leo found himself facing a new, more menacing presence. It was a shadowy figure, its form undefined, moving in a way that seemed unnatural. This spirit was different, it exuded a malevolence that Leo had not encountered in the other ghosts. Frozen in fear, Leo watched as the figure moved closer, its form becoming more distinct. It was the spirit of a former opera house manager, known for his cruelty and ruthless ambition. In death, his spirit had become twisted, filled with rage and resentment. Leo realized he was in danger. This spirit was not seeking acknowledgement or release, it was bound by its own malevolence, a dark entity feeding on the sorrow and tragedy of the opera house. He needed to find a way to banish this malevolent spirit before it could do any harm. As the storm raged on, Leo faced the malevolent spirit, his mind racing to find a solution. He knew that the opera house was a place of powerful emotions, both good and bad. To save the sanctuary he had created, he would need to confront the darkness that lurked in its shadows. Chapter 6: The Malevolent Shadow. In the bowels of the opera house, where the darkness seemed to pulse with a life of its own, Leo stood face to face with the malevolent spirit. The air was thick with a sense of dread, the only sound the distant rumble of the storm outside. The spirit, a distorted shadow of the former manager, loomed over Leo. Its eyes, if it had any, were hidden in the depths of its formless face, but Leo could feel its gaze piercing through him, a gaze filled with hatred and malice. Leo's heart pounded in his chest, fear gripping him. He knew he was dealing with a force far more dangerous than the sorrowful spirits he had encountered before. This entity thrived on darkness, its essence woven from the pain and cruelty that had once echoed through the halls of the opera house. Desperate, Leo recalled the words of Mrs. Aldridge, the historian. She had spoken of the power of acknowledgement and resolution, how understanding the stories of the spirits could bring them peace. But this spirit seemed beyond any peace, its existence a testament to the darker aspects of human nature. Leo took a step back, his mind racing for a solution. He remembered an old ritual Mrs. Aldridge had mentioned, one that could banish malevolent spirits. It required confronting the entity with a symbol of its own malice, forcing it to acknowledge its dark past. Scouring the basement, Leo found an old, tarnished trophy, an award the manager had won for his contributions to the opera. He held it up, speaking loudly over the howling wind, "You were once a man of ambition and pride, but your actions brought nothing but pain and suffering." The spirit recoiled as if struck, the air around it vibrating with a sinister energy. Leo continued, "Your legacy is not one of success, but of the harm you caused, the lives you ruined." With each word, the spirit seemed to shrink, its form becoming less defined, as if Leo's words were eroding its very existence. The trophy in Leo's hand began to glow with a faint light, a beacon in the overwhelming darkness. As Leo spoke his final words, the spirit let out a guttural scream, a sound so filled with agony and rage that it shook the foundations of the opera house. Then, in a burst of shadow and light, the spirit dissipated, leaving behind a heavy silence. Leo stood there, panting, the trophy still glowing faintly in his hand. He had faced the darkness of the opera house and emerged victorious. But the victory was bittersweet. The encounter had taken a toll on him, a reminder of the fine line between the living and the dead, between sorrow and malevolence. He made his way back to the main hall of the opera house, the storm outside beginning to subside. The building felt different now, as if a weight had been lifted. The benevolent spirits, sensing the change, appeared to him, their forms glowing softly in the dim light. They surrounded Leo, their presence a comforting warmth. He had saved their sanctuary, a place where their stories could be heard, where their presence was acknowledged. But as he looked around at the spirits, Leo knew that his journey was not over. There were still stories to be told, secrets to uncover. The opera house, with all its shadows and echoes, was a never-ending well of tales, each waiting for someone to listen, to understand. As the first light of dawn crept through the windows, Leo felt a renewed sense of purpose. He would continue his work, delving deeper into the mysteries of the opera house, a guardian to the spirits that called it home. Chapter 7 The Unseen Boundaries. The opera house, now purged of its malevolent presence, seemed to breathe a sigh of relief. Yet, for Leo, the air was still tinged with an undercurrent of unease. The encounter in the basement had opened his eyes to the delicate balance between the spiritual and the physical realms, a balance that was far more fragile than he had imagined. Leo's nights were no longer filled with fear, but with a deep sense of responsibility. The spirits, now more active than ever, seemed to gravitate towards him, each eager to share their tale, to find some semblance of peace in their eternal wandering. Among these spirits, the weeping widow remained the most elusive. Her appearances were sporadic, her presence always accompanied by a palpable sense of sorrow. Leo felt a particular affinity towards her, her story resonating deeply with his own sense of loss and longing. One foggy night, as Leo walked through the dimly lit corridors of the opera house, he felt a sudden chill, a sign that he was not alone. Turning a corner, he came face to face with the weeping widow. Her ghostly form was more defined than he had ever seen before, her eyes brimming with unspoken words. Leo, taking a deep breath, addressed her, "Why do you linger in this realm? What is it that binds you to this place?" The weeping widow remained silent, her gaze fixed on something unseen, lost in her own world of grief. As Leo watched her, a sudden realization dawned on him. The weeping widow was not just bound to the opera house by her own sorrow, but by the tragedies of others. Her spirit had become a vessel for the collective grief and heartache that had seeped into the walls of the opera house over the years. Determined to help her, Leo delved deeper into the research, seeking out Mrs. Aldridge for guidance. Together, they uncovered ancient rituals and practices that could potentially free a spirit from its earthly bindings. However, as they prepared for the ritual, a sense of foreboding settled over Leo. The boundaries between the worlds were thinning, and the risk of something going awry was high. Mrs. Aldridge warned him that meddling with such forces could have unforeseen consequences. Undeterred, Leo proceeded with the ritual. On a stormy night, with the full moon casting eerie shadows across the opera house, he and Mrs. Aldridge set up an altar on the main stage. Candles flickered in the gloom as they recited ancient incantations, calling upon the weeping widow to join them. As the ritual reached its climax, the candles blazed with an unnatural intensity, and the air grew heavy with a charged energy. The weeping widow appeared before them, her form shimmering in the candlelight. Leo, feeling a connection with her, reached out his hand. For a brief moment, their worlds touched, a mingling of the living and the dead. In that instant, a powerful force surged through the opera house, a force that broke the boundaries between realms. The ritual, instead of freeing the weeping widow, had an unintended effect. Her spirit, charged with the energy of the ritual, began to manifest in a more physical form. The candles flickered wildly as her figure became more solid, her ghostly visage transforming into a living, breathing entity. Leo watched in horror as the weeping widow, now in a corporeal form, stepped off the stage, her eyes gleaming with a newfound power. She was no longer just a spirit, she had become something else, something more dangerous. As she disappeared into the shadows of the opera house, Leo realized the gravity of what he had done. The weeping widow, once a sorrowful spirit, was now a formidable entity, capable of influencing the physical world. The opera house grew silent, the spirits retreating into the darkness. Leo, standing alone on the stage, knew that he had unleashed something he might not be able to control. The weeping widow, in her new form, was a threat not just to the opera house, but to the world beyond its walls. As the storm raged on outside, Leo understood that this was just the beginning. The weeping widow's legacy was far from over, and he had a pivotal role to play in the events that were about to unfold. Chapter 8: The Transcendence. The opera house, once a sanctuary of art and history, now stood as a threshold between worlds, its corridors echoing with a tension that was palpable. Leo, his heart heavy with regret, paced the stage, his mind racing with the implications of what had transpired. The weeping widow, now in a physical form, was an entity of immense power, her sorrow transformed into something far more sinister. As the storm outside howled, mirroring the chaos within the opera house, Leo knew he had to act. He couldn't let the weeping widow leave the confines of the opera house. Her grief, now amplified and twisted, could wreak havoc in the world of the living. He searched the opera house, moving through the shadowed halls and deserted rooms, calling out for the weeping widow. But she was elusive, her presence a fleeting whisper in the darkness. It was as if she was part of the opera house itself, moving through its walls and spaces like a ghostly wraith. Then, in the depths of the night, Leo heard it, a voice, not quite human, singing a haunting aria. The melody was sorrowful, yet imbued with a dark allure. He followed the sound to the main auditorium, where he found her standing center stage, her form more defined, her features sharp and clear in the ghostly light. The weeping widow turned to face him, her eyes no longer filled with just sadness, but with a malevolent gleam. She was not just a spirit of sorrow now, she was an embodiment of vengeance and anguish, twisted by the ritual into something far more dangerous. Leo tried to reason with her, to remind her of her humanity, but the weeping widow was beyond reason. She moved with a grace that was unnerving, her voice echoing through the hall, "I am no longer bound by the chains of grief. I am free to unleash my sorrow upon the world." As she spoke, a dark energy radiated from her, the air around her crackling with power. Leo realized that he was facing an entity that was no longer just a spirit, but a force of nature, unpredictable and uncontrollable. In a desperate move, Leo reached out to the other spirits of the opera house, calling for their aid. One by one, they appeared, their forms shimmering in the dim light. Together, they confronted the weeping widow, their presence a barrier between her and the world outside. But the weeping widow was relentless. She moved like a tempest, her anger and pain manifesting in waves of dark energy that threatened to overwhelm the spirits. Leo, standing amidst the chaos, felt a deep sense of despair. The opera house had become a battleground, a place where the line between the living and the dead was blurred beyond recognition. In the midst of the turmoil, a young actress from the opera company, named Isabel, entered the auditorium, drawn by the strange energies emanating from within. Her eyes wide with fear, she watched the scene unfold, the air thick with supernatural tension. The weeping widow, sensing the presence of the living, turned her gaze towards Isabel. In a swift, fluid motion, she moved towards the young actress, her form enveloping Isabel in a shroud of darkness. Leo cried out, rushing forward, but it was too late. A blinding light filled the room, and when it subsided, Isabel stood where the weeping widow had been, her eyes now reflecting the same malevolent gleam. The weeping widow had found a new vessel, a living form through which she could enact her vengeance. Isabel, or rather the entity that now controlled her, turned to Leo. Her voice was a chilling blend of the weeping widow's sorrow and Isabel's innocence. The stage is set for a new act, one that will spill beyond these walls. Leo, his heart sinking, realized the gravity of the situation. The weeping widow, now in possession of a human form, was more dangerous than ever. She could leave the opera house, her sorrow and rage unleashed upon the unsuspecting world. As the entity that was once the weeping widow and now Isabel walked towards the exit, the spirits of the opera house gathered around Leo. They were powerless to stop her, their existence bound to the opera house. Leo, alone, was left to confront the horror he had unwittingly unleashed. The storm outside reached its crescendo, thunder echoing like a mournful chorus. The weeping widow, in Isabel's body, stepped out into the night, her form disappearing into the darkness. Leo stood in the empty auditorium, the weight of his failure pressing down upon him. He had to find a way to stop her, to reverse the ritual that had given her this terrifying power. But as he stepped out into the storm, following the path of the entity, he knew that this was just the beginning of a much darker journey. The opera house, with its secrets and stories, had become the birthplace of a new legend, one that would haunt the city streets. The weeping widow's legacy was far from over, her story now intertwined with the fate of the living.